A wedding band stops mid-song. Not a mistake, one specific street. They pack up, walk around it, and start playing again on the other side. Not a superstition anyone's shy about, a real rule held for centuries in a small German town called Hamelin. No music, no dancing on that one street. Everyone is sure they know this town's story. Hamelin remembers it differently. Because the version everyone remembers, the rats, the flute, the colorful piper, that's not the oldest version. It's not even close. The oldest surviving record of what happened in Hamelin doesn't mention a single rat. To understand what actually vanished from this town, we need to go back. Not to a fairy tale, but to a single, specific, documented afternoon. June 26th, 1284. Precise dates like this almost never survive from the 1200s, not for peasants, not for children who left no other trace in any record. Someone thought this was worth remembering exactly. Hamelin sat on the Weser River, a prosperous trading town in what's now northern Germany. Mills, merchants, a market church at its center. This is that same market church today, rebuilt after bombing in the Second World War, standing on the exact spot where the original window once hung. It was an ordinary town, which is exactly why what the chronicles say happened next is so unsettling. On the feast day of Saints John and Paul, a piper arrived, described in the earliest sources only as clothed in all kinds of colors. No mention of a rat problem, no mention of a broken payment, just he came and he played. And 130 children followed him out of Hamelin toward a hill called the Kopen, and were never seen again. 130. That number isn't a legend's rounding. It shows up specifically in the earliest sources we have. Later retellings added two names to the record. One a boy too lame to keep pace, another too blind to follow. As the story goes, they alone came back to tell the town what they'd seen. It's a powerful detail. It also isn't in the earliest sources, which makes it useful to remember and dangerous to trust. This is the closest thing we have to an eyewitness image, a 1592 painting copying a stained glass window that once hung in Hamelin's market church, made around the year 1300. The original glass was destroyed in the 1600s. A baron named Augustin von Morsberg traveled from Alsace just to see it first, and paint a copy, because even 300 years later, people needed to know if the story was true. A medieval nobleman going on a research trip to fact-check a folk tale. Some of us just do this for a living now. The oldest written text we have comes from a house in Hamelin, still standing, called the Rattenfänger House, the Piper's House. Translated, its inscription reads, "In the year 1284, on the day of John and Paul, a piper, clothed in all kinds of colors, led away 130 children born in Hamelin, lost near Calvary by the Kopen." A century later, in 1384, the town's own chronicle recorded just one line. "It is 100 years since our children left." Not were taken, not were killed. Left, as if the town still didn't have a word for what happened. A second, independent record turned up centuries later, a Latin manuscript in the city of Lüneburg, confirming the same date, the same event, from outside Hamelin entirely. It sat unnoticed in an archive until 1936, when a historian named Heinrich Spaneth finally found it. So, 3 independent medieval sources, same date, same number, same missing children. None of them mention rats. The rats don't enter the story until 1559, nearly 300 years later, in a chronicle written by a German count. By then, a whole backstory had been bolted on. The piper had been hired to clear the town of rats, luring them into the Weser to drown. The town paid him in insults instead of coin, so he came back and paid himself in children. A morality tale about stiffing a tradesman on his fee, grafted 3 centuries later onto a very real tragedy. The brothers Grimm collected the tale, rats included by then, in 1816. And in 1842, English poet Robert Browning turned it into verse, later illustrated in 1888 by Kate Greenaway. That's the piper you picture. Storybook, colorful, faintly ridiculous. None of that touches what actually happened to 130 real children in a real town. So what do historians think it was? The leading theory has nothing to do with the Piper at all. It's called Ostsiedlung, the eastward German settlement of the 1200s. After a battle in 1227 opened up Baltic lands to German expansion, recruiters traveled the countryside, offering young people land and a fresh start in Pomerania, hundreds of miles east. These recruiters even had a formal title, locators, legally contracted to deliver settlers in exchange for land grants of their own. It was a business, with paperwork. A linguist named Jürgen Udolf traced surnames and place names from Hamelin's own region and found matches in villages across Poland and northern Germany, exactly where those settlers would have ended up. Not every historian is convinced. Those surnames were common across German-speaking lands generally. Critics argue a shared dialect doesn't prove a shared hometown. Still, genealogists have picked up the trail, and if your own family runs back through this part of Germany, there's a real chance you could follow it too, hunting for a branch that vanished east 7 centuries ago. In this version, nobody died. The children just left. For good. To a place their families in Hamelin would never see. One softer branch of the same theory even links the story to German-speaking communities that appeared around the same era in Transylvania. Remember the 2 children left behind in the retelling? In that version, the rest didn't die. They became the ancestors of those very villages. It's the loosest thread of the theory, worth naming, not worth trusting fully. Other historians point to plain disaster, plague, or a landslide near the Copen Hill that simply killed them, and a town too ashamed to record how. A stranger, better documented parallel exists. In 1237, roughly 100 children in the German town of Erfurt began dancing uncontrollably and couldn't stop. They danced for days, all the way to the next town, before collapsing. Some died. Survivors reportedly carried a tremor for the rest of their lives. It happened decades before Hamelin, in the same part of Germany, which is exactly why some historians wonder if something like it struck here too. None of them can be proven. 742 years later, nobody actually knows what happened to those children. What Hamelin does know is how to remember it. Every June 26th, the town still stages the story in the streets, Rattenfängertag, Piper's Day. Walk through Hamelin today, and you'll find bronze rats embedded in the sidewalk, guiding tourists past every landmark. A whole cottage industry built on the one detail historians are most sure never happened. And that street we started with, Bungelosenstrasse, the street without drums? Locals will tell you it's the last place the children were ever seen. So the band still packs up early, the wedding still turns the corner. Centuries of silence, kept for a debt no one can prove is owed. The rats were fiction, the flute was fiction, the 130 empty beds in Hamelin were not.